Let's start with the tariff and the economic fallout expected from the Trump tariffs, which are going to be imposed on India on August 7th, unless, of course, the pause button is hit again and Donald Trump offers a fresh extension. Now, SBI Research has released a report which outlines what could potentially be the economic fallout for India as well as for the US when it comes to these tariffs. Well, tariffs in tariffs on India from goods being imported into the US are likely to spike inflation across the US. Inflation could spike as much as 2.4% as per SBI and could cost US households $2,400 each every year. But it's not just US and the inflation in US which is going to be the victim. In fact, even India's GDP could take a beating. Remember, India exports as much as $80 billion worth of goods to the US every year. Now, India's GDP, owing to this 25% tariff which has been slapped on India, could face a decline of as much as 25 to 30 basis points in the ongoing financial year, that's FY26. Meanwhile, even as clarity is awaited on whether or not the pharma sector and electronics exports are going to be exempt or not from the latest wave of tariffs, there is a chance that if the 25% tariff is slapped on these sectors as well, then there could be a major blow to India's pharma as well as electronics exports. Meanwhile, India's BRICS push is likely the trigger behind the trade fallout, and that seems to be what the SBI Research believes as the geopolitical angle to the tariff trade with India. Now, also, the US remains India's top export market despite the tariffs imposed at 25%. All right, and this is what SBI Research report has come out with. This is the economic fallout of the trade with US and how that is likely to impact consumers both in the US as well as in India. Well, meanwhile, Indian-run state refiners have paused Russian oil purchases over the past week as discounts tightened and US President Donald Trump warned of 100% tariffs on countries buying Russian crude. Remember, India, the world's third largest oil importer, has been a key buyer of Russian seaborne oil, crucial for Moscow. And there's also breaking news coming in right now. US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order for new tariffs on almost 70 countries, which is yet to go into effect. The August 1st deadline has now been pushed by 7 days to August 7th. The list includes India, which will have to pay a 25% tariff effective 7 days from now. Earlier, Trump had announced that India's tariff rate would be effective August 1st, but the executive order signed for 69 countries with India on the list says the new tariff rates will be applicable from August 7th. Well, we have a very special guest joining us this morning. Economist Laveesh Bhandari joins us with all the latest to be discussed on this trade war with the US. Mr. Bhandari, good morning. Thank you so much and a pleasure having you here on News 9. Not surprising, really, the August 1st deadline has now been pushed to August 7th. There has been absolutely no headway as far as India's negotiations with the US go. The sixth round is slated for August 25th, but until then, it seems that the 25% tariff is here to stay. Meanwhile, we are also hearing, in fact, a research report by SBI which states that India's economy, India's GDP could take a 30 basis point hit. Meanwhile, inflation in the US could spike about 2.4%. What are you making of the economic fallout first of the trade war, so to speak, with the US before we come to the geopolitics of it?
So first, I don't think we should see it as a trade war at all. I mean, this is a set of actions that the United States is taking on a whole range of countries, not just India. Of course, the U.S. has been very quite intent on trying to find some sort of a solution, but at the same time, it is fairly clear that India held strong to whatever its objectives were. So I see this as an ongoing negotiation process. It's just a matter of Trump essentially carrying out some of the threats that he had said, but at the same time giving certain leeways to it. So I don't think we should see it as an end all. This is work in progress, and it's hopefully going to get resolved soon.
Well, hopefully it will get resolved soon. But Mr. Bhandari, that is something that we've been hearing right from the month of February, in fact, this year. And it's August 1st in India today. So it's been a few months. There have been multiple rounds of negotiations. And it seems that at one level, perhaps Donald Trump is adding more pressure on India to quickly come and sign the deal. But at another level, it also seems that it's the geopolitics of Russia, the fact that India is part of the BRICS bloc, the fact that India imports, not just India, in fact, even China imports energy from Russia. India has a military love affair, so to speak, in Donald Trump's language, with Russia. I want to understand from you, how crucial is India's equation with Russia?
So, that's all clutter. This is all about political economy. It is not geopolitics. Yes, there is a Russia problem, and that is a part of this whole process. But I think the real issue has to do with countries imposing tariffs on countries which are not being too friendly to the United States in terms of trade. And so this is a political economic issue. The issues or the tensions are related to agriculture and dairy, and those are issues which are politically very sensitive in India, and it so happens that they are that as for the United States as well. And then on top of that, there's geopolitics, and then of course that India has been buying Russian oil, but I think that is an add-on. I think that part is an easier problem to solve than the one that.
Why do you say that's an easier problem to solve, Dr. Bhandari? Because that seems to be a more difficult problem to solve, given the fact that we still get Russian oil at a discount. While the discounts have tapered, it's not as deep a discount as it used to be. But the fact that in case India and China work collectively not to buy oil from Russia, there's going to be pressure on OPEC, and the increased demand could in fact spike global oil prices, and that may be detrimental to India's cause as well, wouldn't it?
Yes, but that's an economic problem. Economic problems typically are easier to solve. Political, economic, and employment-related issues are far more difficult, and where the government has to be naturally far more sensitive to the needs. So that's the point. Russia is something which we can solve, and it's just a matter of time before it would be. The issue essentially has to do with what do you do about Mr. Trump's desire to enter Indian agriculture and dairy markets, and India's desire to actually prevent that. It's as simple as that. It is a difficult problem, but there are always solutions. If you sit down and you talk and you work it out, there are many different workarounds for these kind of issues, but it's going to be a tough one. At the same time, this is a hardening of stance by Mr. Trump. What that means is the degrees of freedom that India had, that he himself have reduced. So it does look, things are getting tighter. But I would still see this as another step in the negotiation process.
All right. Well, of course, and added pressure on India, no doubt, especially the fact that the pendulum has swung from one extreme to the other, Dr. Bhandari, from India being a great friend and the fact that India was among the first countries to start the negotiations and the trade talks with the US. In fact, back in February, March, the estimation was that India would perhaps be the first country to go ahead and sign that trade deal with the US. And here we are. Multiple countries have gone ahead, starting with the UK, Vietnam, now even Indonesia, and a plethora of countries that have gone ahead and struck deals with the US. And meanwhile, the stance that US seems to be taking on India and the language being used seems fairly critical. So, for example, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent yesterday on an interview on CNBC Global pretty much criticized India's negotiation process and said that India has not been a great global actor. In fact, he went on to say that the negotiators in Washington have been frustrated in their efforts to strike a meaningful dialogue with India. He's also accused India of delaying the process of negotiations despite initially showing interest. And he's also highlighted the concerns over India's role, like we discussed, in reselling Russian oil as well as refined products. Add to that, in fact, a few hours before that, Donald Trump going all out and calling the Indian economy a dead economy, pretty much defying all the data that's out there. So the language, the stance, all of this just seems to be a lot harsher today than perhaps the cozy equation that was enjoyed in the month of February and up till maybe, just a month ago.
Absolutely. And in fact, in February, they also said something to the effect that India is a hard negotiator, and we love that about India.
Exactly.
Right. So you're absolutely right. This is a hardening of stance. The US has not succeeded in breaking through into the agriculture and dairy domains where India has held forth. So you should see all of these statements as just part of that. What is surprising, however, is the maturity or perhaps how India has responded to these. It has essentially not responded to many of these extreme statements. It's been very, very, how to put it, measured in its responses. And that's really surprising, because I think in these times where countries can one day fight with each other and the next day become great friends and be on the negotiation table, has become quite natural. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see some of that from India as well. And I don't think it really matters. In the end, it's all about negotiation, who yields on what issues and in what manner.
All right, but we will come to India's response also, and let's also listen to what Piyush Goyal had to say. But before that, I want to just understand from you, and again, quote the SBI research paper once again. If, Dr. Bhandari, India continues to be slapped with the 25% tariff, and let's say hypothetically, there is no sweeter deal on the table that both the countries can agree on, then is the economic fallout on India likely to be catastrophic? Because even a 30 basis point reduction in GDP is fairly sizable, given India has been the fastest growing economy, racing to cross Japan by end of this year, Germany by end of 2027, 2028. So how big of a dent, in your opinion, could this 25% tariff be for India's economic ambitions?
So it will not be catastrophic. So let's get that word out of the picture.
All right.
It would impact India's growth and its march towards 2047. And so essentially you would want a deal. And you would want the deal not just to be able to access US markets, but also for enhancing productivity domestically. It's extremely important to be able to do that to get high enough growth. So the 30 basis points reduction, I don't know the estimates and I don't know where they've come from, but I don't see, whatever be the number, it's not going to be a catastrophic event. It will, however, impact India's long-term march. The US, however, will be actually fairly impacted in a very limited manner. And so therefore, you can expect US to negotiate harder. They have less to lose.
All right, US likely to get impacted harder is the view coming in from Dr. Bhandari. Dr. Bhandari, you were also talking about India's measured response. Well, some quarters also saying that perhaps the response was a little defiant, if I can use that word, simply because the first response that came from India after this 25% tariff was announced was that India is going to continue to defend its farm sector, its entrepreneurs, its MSMEs. So do you also see a sense of defiance in India's response that, come what may, we are not negotiating on the farm sector, we are not negotiating on the dairy sector?
Absolutely. So it was defined, but it was still measured. It was not pointing fingers at the United States. It was just saying that we need to protect ourselves. So I think it was a very, very wise method of handling the situation. However, having said that, I think it's just a matter of time before we start to see stronger statements coming in from the Indian government.
All right, Dr. Bhandari, let's leave it with that optimism this morning. On August 1st, scheduled to be the D-Day for tariffs, now pushed to August 7th. But thank you so much for joining us with your input, Dr. Bhandari.